All right, hello everyone. It's Sideralis Music here again, and we are back with possibly, I'm gonna theorize, one of the most anticipated videos of a build guide. That's right, we are going to be getting into the Spellblades. Probably everyone's favorite weapon, or at least one of them, a variation of it. Besides the legendary weapons, but this is a pretty special magic build, is that it doesn't really work like you think it would at first. That's why you kind of gotta read updates of mods and stuff, but I'm here to tell you how it works. And we're actually going to jump into this right away. Last video, we did pretty much an introduction to magic and casting spells and how that works. So today we're going to be getting into the Spellblades build, which is kind of the first, strong magic build, I would say. And there's even a couple of variations of just pure spell casting with these blades that you can do. But the first things that we're going to get into, of course, as tradition of all the videos so far, is that we're going to get into our stats that we're going to have as a, what I would say as a battle mage, which is basically a melee magic hybrid, which is basically what the Spellblades are. So you're going to have 50 luckiness and you're going to have 50 strength. You're not really going to have any intelligence for the battle mage builds specifically. And the reason why is that you actually get these infusion stacks for how much attack damage you have, and that's physical attack damage. And these infusion stacks actually boost whatever elemental power you have of the Spellblade that you are wielding. So if I were wielding an Arcane Spellblade, for example, and I were to attack with it, I would all of a sudden get a bunch of infusion stacks that would really help my my magic damage as well, and my magic casting, and if I were using the Battlemage book or not. And we'll get into all that. But yeah, basically you're just going to want to do 50 strength and 50 luckiness as per normal. And of course, no more than 50 luckiness, because you get no more crit chance after 50 points. And then strength, because the attack damage and the crit damage as well, because the magic damage of the spell blades themselves actually don't go off of spell crit. Everything really kind of goes off of your attack damage. And like I said, you're really only going to want to be doing intelligence if you're purely casting with the blades. And that would actually kind of make you a spell sword. So there's the normal battle mage build in which you get infusions based off your attack damage, so you can do a really good amount of kind of both damage, but your main thing is going to be your strength. But then if you want to purely cast with the blades, you can build it exactly like the caster builds here, except you're going to be using the blades to cast. And the reason you would want to do that is because the blades can actually have some stronger enchants than the weapons that were introduced in these builds here. So the first element that we have is ice. I call this the champion of the north. It's pretty well rounded, and there's also a enhanced version of a weapon that you can use that's called a Frostborn Gavel, and we'll go into that weapon a little bit later. But yeah, it has a hammer, which is pretty cool, and yes, you can dual wield it. Kind of works like an axe, but I think it does. I don't know if it counts as an axe or it counts as a sword. I just know that it can take all the enchantments that I have listed in here in this chest. The next one I call the Wardancer. It's AoE, it's fire. That's kind of a given. It's very anime though. It has one of the anime types abilities that I mentioned for the Pyromancer in the last video. And then we have the Mystic Blade, which is going to be our arcane damage, and it's kind of very similar to this one, the caster. But it's it's DPS. It's a damage dealer. It's got a little bit of AOE. It's kind of like sort of AOE, but it's also very single target. So it's pretty straightforward. It's just that the only difference with these builds right here is that you could really, you could either go pretty much melee and be better. Well, I wouldn't say better than standard melee, but magic can actually help out, and you'll definitely be stronger early game and mid game. Melee doesn't actually get insanely strong until you really grind out those simply sword weapons that I mentioned, and you get the gems for them. But these are like strong, very strong starting out, and they really help take down Archmagus as well, and the Magus boss as well. But yeah, now that we've kind of gone over what all these are about, let's get into how we would build it. So like I said before, your attack damage is what's going to give you those infusions, so you can have both really good attack damage and magic damage. So Titan Shroud obviously is going to be the best choice for us because of that attack damage and that attack speed. The Titan Shroud bonus that you get for the full set is also really good because you can give your opponents stuff like weakness and mining fatigue and slowness. A lot of really bad debuffs you can give your opponents, and that's going to be on hit, every hit, as long as you're doing damage to it, which you should be, especially because magic just goes through armor, and at least a portion of your damage is going to be magic. And if you're casting, all of it's going to be magic, so there you go. So yeah, that's pretty straightforward. And again, every percentage or point of attack damage counts towards those infusion stacks, which you're really going to want. So you're basically you're a hybrid. You're a battle mage, but you can also be a spell sword as well, and you can attack with the sword and still deal magic damage, but you'll mostly be casting if you're a spell sword, and which of course again you're going to be building it just like those. You wouldn't be using Titan Shroud. You would be using probably the robes. But there is another set. There's, let's see, at Spellblades. Yeah, there's these rune armor sets, which you don't get the other buffs like the ice giving haste, the fire giving, the frost giving haste, the fire giving crit chance, and the arcane giving crit damage. You don't get those, but you do get the same amount of spell power, and if you want survivability, these are good because they give you like absorption hearts per piece, so you can end up with 8 absorption hearts, and that is something that some people might want. I know several people who have actually used these sets in the past and were more than happy with them. So you can use that if you're going to be a spell sword and you're just going to cast with the blades. But again, a battle mage is going to have the Titan Shroud. So on to the enchants. I'm going to go over the enchants for the Titan Shroud, the enchants for the caster ones. I'll just go over the differences. So mending, obviously you're going to want mending because you want a way to repair your armor. You're going to stack that on, or you're going to put that on all your armor. Life mending, you can have it, you can choose not to have it. If you are going to have it, prioritize it right after mending. And you can have both on the same armor piece, and it will be wise to put that on all of your armor if you are going to have this enchant. You can combine books to get life mending 4 if you want to, or the Zenith enchant table setup, which you can craft the Chronicle of Shadows to learn all about Zenith. Then there's going to be the Bag of Souls 3, because you need a way of gaining experience, and it really helps gain experience so that you can level up and also enchant your gear. And experience is important for a particular enchant, a weapon enchant that we'll go over a little bit later on. And you're going to want to put that on all of your armor because it stacks, so it's very good. Protection, obviously, you're going to want to have that on your armor. It's still one of the best Minecraft enchants. It was really good when it came out, and it's still really good. You can combine books up to protection 5. There's a structure called Mushroom Mines that has protection 8. And there's a structure called the Colosseum that has protection 10. And yes, you would be able to stack all of those and get some extra protection. But it's not that much. Protection 20 is what this would essentially be, all 4 protection 5s. That used to be the cap, but the cap has been raised. You can get a maximum of protection 40 in this game, even though the cap is raised all the way to 65. However, it's like, I think it's like 33%, or I'm sorry, 0.33% more protection per level of protection you have after protection 20. So, you can do 20 times 0.33, and it is a very small protection that, you get after level 20, so you don't necessarily have to really grind that out if you don't want to, but you can if you want to. So, then there's Berserker's Fury 3. It's very strong early game and mid game. It can be phased out later on in the game. And if you are ready to get rid of it, you can use something called a prismatic cobweb. Very easy to craft to actually get rid of that, because it counts as a curse enchant. Because you see that it's in red. If it's in red, it's a curse. But the reason that it's a curse is because when you take damage, you're always going to take the first hit. It's almost always going to be about, I think, 4 to 6 hearts or something like that. But you end up getting Strength 3, Resistance 3, and Speed 3 when you have that. And then you don't end up getting hurt again if you have Proc 20 by most mobs and even bosses. So it's a very strong enchant to have, but it can get phased out by endgame, which we'll go over way later, of the main reason of why it gets phased out. So Unbreaking is a pretty good thing to have on your armor. It just, helps with general durability, especially if you have protection, which actually helps with durability because it does absorb some damage. So not all the damage goes to your armor. So protection actually helps with durability. Life Mending and Mending, of course, can also help with durability because it's ways of healing your armor. Deflect. If you're having trouble with arrows, you can use Deflect. But if you're not, you don't have to have it. It only goes on one piece, but it can go on any piece of armor. So choose which one you want to put it on, but it does not stack. So since it doesn't stack, only put it on one piece of armor. Same with Berserker's Fury 3. Not only does it not stack, but it only goes on the chest. So you're only going to be putting that on the chest. Fire Focus, same thing. It does not stack, but it can go on any piece of armor. It increases the amount of damage done by fire attacks, so similar to Fire Aspect. It actually especially increases the damage by Fire Aspect. But I do find that it's a small amount that... It's such a small amount that it's not exactly, a high priority. It's way lower down in this priority list over here. Same with Thorns. I find that you can have Thorns, you can not have Thorns. You can combine books to overlevel it to this level right here, and the REI over here actually shows you the max level of an enchant that you can get in the game when you hover over, or when you search that enchant up. So if you are going to get Thorns, though, stack it. Causes damage to enemies when they attack you, so it can be alright. But, I don't find it that necessary. Burning is the same thing. It's just a fiery version of Thorns. So you can have it, you cannot have it. There is another thing I guess I can mention. I don't really prefer it, but I could see why someone might prefer it. There's also Icy Thorns, which can slow attackers. That's kind of whatever. But if you want that, you can have it, especially if you're doing like some sort of ice-based build where you're doing a lot of crowd control. I could see you opting for Icy Thorns. Icy Thorns and Burning cannot go together, though. So make sure that when you're choosing Icy Thorns, don't choose Burning. Just choose Icy Thorns. So, since you're probably going to be fighting Archmagus, especially to get this Frostborn Gavel here, because that is an Archmagus drop. You might want magic protection. There's 2 types of magic protection in the game. I would get this one. This one goes all the way up to 7. The other one goes to 6. This one has a different definition than the other one that goes to 6. They both do the same sort of thing as far as I know, because magic damage is just magic damage at the end of the day. It's just that this one goes all the way to 7, so I assume it's just overall better. So yeah. Magic protection cannot currently combine with protection, so you're probably going to have to create another armor set just to fight Archmagus. However, in a future update, they will be able to go together on the same armor piece, so you might as well get it when that future update takes place. So the way you get the Archmagus is if you're doing a bunch of spells, which you should be because you have Spellblades. Even if you're, purely casting, of course, you're going to be casting a bunch of spells. You can cast a bunch of spells on something called a target dummy, which is very easy to create. Just search target dummy in the REI. You can just cast a bunch of spells on this thing right here, and then a bunch of, or a Hexblade trader will show up. And you can either trade for these Hexblades, or you can let the Hexbladers, these Hexblades, invade you. A portal will pop up. And they drop Spellblades, they drop a magic effigy to summon regular Magus, and they drop a missive, which is like a book, and that can, it can like help you. It talks a little bit about Archmagus and gives hints to like the dimension and stuff. It just kind of gives hints to the mod. But you can trade for one of these Hexblades here. Yeah, Magister's Hexblade. And you can actually kill Magus to get this, I believe. But you can also trade for it, I believe. Yeah, Magus actually drops this Hexblade. So, oh, and looks like Magus drops the Frostborn Gavel too. So, you don't really have to fight Archmagus, I guess, to get the Frostborn Gavel, but fighting Archmagus might as well be something you do since you're a magic character. So when you get this Hexblade, you basically can hold this in your inventory to prevent from being hexed, so that prevents a Hexblade portal from like popping up. But you kind of need the Hexblade portal to pop up to get access to the Glass Ocean, and there you use the magic effigy to summon Archmagus. So the trick is to carry this thing in your backpack, because that does not count as your inventory. And then the Hexblades can invade you, everything can proceed as normal, and you can then take the Magister Hexblade out of your backpack, hold it, go up to the portal that the Hexblades appeared in, right-click it, and now all of a sudden you're in the Glass Ocean. And hopefully you're ready to face Archmagus, because dying in the Glass Ocean sucks. So just make sure you're ready, because otherwise it's kind of a pain to get back there. That's kind of why you also carry Waystones with you. Let me see. Waystones. Yeah, these things. You can craft them. There's all different variations of them. They're pretty easy to craft. Even this thing, very easy to craft. So, carry a bunch of these with you. Place it down everywhere you go. Yes, they work in between dimensions. So, basically, if you die somewhere that's normally hard to get to, if you have a Waystone on you, it won't be that hard to get to. So, there's a little tip for you. Alright, so the XP gain. You can wear a Soul Dancer robe for experience gain. You get Soul Dancer's experience bonus if you have the full set, which is 100% experience gain. You also get Soul Dancer's Grace, which is 30% chance to evade an attack, which is kind of nice because you don't get much armor with this robe. You really don't get that much armor toughness either. These robes also have low durability. You're going to want to at least put these enchants on them, probably. Maybe even Unbreaking. There's also the Lapis Traveler's Backpack. I've gone with or without this Soul Dancer robe in many playthroughs, so it's kind of up to you if you want to create it or not. It can be kind of expensive because this set costs, netherite ingots to make. This set also costs netherite ingots to make. So it's up to you whether you want to actually have this in your experience gain setup or not. Personally, I find that I don't have that much time to play Minecraft. So I usually don't grind this out, but there was an instance in which I have grinded this out before, and it was alright. I liked it. You have the Lapis Traveler's Backpack, which is really nice. It, chance to multiply amount of experience, so you can just wear this on your travels and gain a bunch of experience when fighting mobs and doing anything that gains experience. And then there's, you can create a separate weapon for this, but there's the specific experience enchants. Knowledge of the Ages, enemy drops are directly converted to experience. So you won't get any loot from anything, bosses, mobs, anything. But all of that loot's going to be converted to experience. So more loot equals more experience. Speaking of more loot, it does combine with looting. So that's really good. Mobs drop more loot when killed. And then, of course, Scavenger, mobs can reroll their loot table twice. So all of that stuff can combine together, and you can get a lot of XP with just the backpack, just this, and just Bag of Souls on your armor, even without this right here. And then there's a weapon enchant, another weapon enchant that we'll talk about that helps you gain XP that you can have. So that's why this is just kind of optional, but it does exist. So your main weapon is probably going to be the Spellblade. Dual wielding Spellblades is what I find gives the most DPS. But there's a lot of people that like the Whirlwind ability, and it's good for clearing out mobs, so you might do a Frost Claymore. And there'll be a reason to do a Frost Claymore because it does give more overall spell power. I do find that these are probably pretty good for being a spell sword and just casting, just because you have more spell power. And there's a pretty, specific way to build that as well. And then there's the Frostborn Gavel, which is basically a more powerful Spellblade, and only Frost gets that, and that's because Fire and Arcane have their own legendary builds, so Frost gets the Frostborn Gavel with these 2 extra abilities that we can go over. But the Spellblade, the Spellblades are going to have an ability called Flourish, which Flourish, you deal 1.5 times melee damage in a circle around you. That's already really good. The damage is multiplied by 20% times the amount of infusion buffs on you. That's also really good. So you already have a built-in multiplier for the infusion buffs that you're getting from strength and other sources of attack damage. It consumes the infusion, but it can be a really strong finisher, and that's pretty nice. I actually like Flourish a lot. I was using it to clear out a lot of different structures because I could actually attack with Flourish before, right before mobs could enter melee range, and I would just instantly wreck them. But then there's, of course, Frost Claymore with Whirlwind. You spin, you deal 3 times melee damage to nearby enemies. There's going to be a penalty for hitting multiple enemies, and there's also a penalty of a 0.2 times modifier for spell on hit effects. So stuff like Overdrive, which is going to be in the Spell Tome, which we'll go over. But a lot of people still like the ability, and I personally like the ability as well. You can also press shift to stop moving, so when this ability casts, you actually sprint forward and you circle, and it's really good for mobility because you're automatically sprinting. And then you can press shift to stop moving, so there are instances in which you can just press W. You can look around with your mouse, and you can press shift to stop moving, and then let go of shift and move again, and then press shift, and you can keep doing that, and you could do some real damage using the ability in that exact way. Then there's Frostborn Gavel, which acts exactly like a Frost Spellblade. You get the infusions with the attack damage. You also get infusions with Frost Claymore as well. Both of those, you get infusions, so that's nice. You also get infusions with this. It has slower attack speed, but as you can see, it has much more attack damage and spell power. And it has 2 special abilities. It has Bone Shatter, which you slam down with your weapon. You deal 2 times melee damage to enemies in the area. You gain stacking momentum, which increases attack damage, but it also increases spell haste, which is really good for casting spells because it helps you cast spells faster. It doesn't reduce cooldown, but it reduces cast time, which is really nice. And then that just increases, as you gain the momentum. You also take 1 physical damage per level of momentum when gaining momentum, but that can be very easily mitigated. So there's that. Frozen Arena, you can conjure an arena of frost around yourself. You immobilize nearby enemies for 2 seconds or until they break free with shift. The break free with shift is mainly for players so that they can't be like perma-stunned. That basically gives players a way to kind of react to Frozen Arena if you're PvPing. But this can actually be really good against like a lot of horde of mobs. I really prefer this ability, and it's one of the more unique looking abilities in the game. So, yeah, I think Frostborn Gavel is actually really good. And if you notice, despite its slow attack speed, it's actually still a one-handed weapon. So you can actually dual wield these if you want to. So that's really, really nice. And of course, it drops from Magus, so you can farm these. And you can get stronger versions in the Nether and the End if you were to summon Magus in the Nether and the End. So, on to the enchants. Mending, of course, pretty staple on this. Life Mending, again, you can have it, you cannot have it, but if you are going to have it, get it after Mending. Works the same way it does on armor. You have a choice between Leeching and Radiance. Because they're incompatible with each other, so you have to kind of choose one. Leeching means that when you kill a mob, you're actually going to heal relative to the max health of the target upon its death. I think it's going to be like 80% of the max target, of the max health upon its death when you have Leeching 4. And mobs have a lot of health in this game, or in this particular mod pack. So Leeching can actually be really useful, especially early on, because you get rewarded really, really well for killing a mob. You basically heal to full when killing mobs. So, but Radiance is also pretty good against mobs. It's even better against bosses because it actually works on bosses because you can heal while fighting a boss. It's a chance to spawn a healing cloud around a target, and that healing cloud is basically just a lingering pool of regeneration. And you can spawn a lot of them, especially with fast attack speed. And you will actually get fast attack speed even without Dex. I highly recommend that you actually don't build Dex with Spellblades, and I'll tell you why. It has a lot to do with this spell tome here. And that's going to be like a pretty big difference other than dealing magic damage when compared with Warrior when wielding Spellblades. So, but yeah, choose between Leeching or Radiance, or you can end up doing, I don't know, both throughout your playthrough. You could end up switching at some point. But yeah, Soul Devourer 3, that's the other XP gain enchant. And again, whether you're dual wielding Frostblades or dual wielding Frostborn Gavels, of course you're going to want these enchants on both of those. You know, all the enchants that I mentioned. And then, of course, with the Claymore, it's a two-handed weapon, so you only have to have the enchants once. But yeah. Now there's Spell Power, which is you can have the spell enchants. You might not need them. Spell Power is probably one you're going to need because you are going to have an on-hit effect of a spell that goes off. So Spell Power is pretty important for all these weapons here. But Spell Infinity, if you're not really going to cast a whole lot of spells and you're just going to depend on the single one-hit spell that's in here, then you're not going to need Spell Infinity because that spell on hit spells do not need runes to actually go off. So that's actually kind of nice. But to cast some of these other spells, like I don't know if Flourish needs a rune to cast. I know this one needs. Yeah, I think Frozen Arena needs a Frost rune in order for you to cast it, but you can use Spell Infinity. If you are going to use Spell Infinity, then you can't have Mending because it's incompatible, so you have to do Life Mending if you're going to do Spell Infinity. If you're purely casting with these weapons, so you're essentially a Spell Sword and you're doing the caster builds, but you're wielding these weapons, then of course you're going to want Spell Infinity, and you'll just do Life Mending, and you won't do Mending because it's incompatible. And then there's Spell Haste, which you can increase the casting speed of your spells. And of course, you don't have to have that if you're a battle mage, but you might want it if you find yourself casting spells sometimes. If you are a pure caster with these weapons, then yes. Or if you mainly cast with these weapons, then yes, you're going to want Spell Haste. So yeah. And then Unbreaking. Definitely get Unbreaking for your weapons. Well, only get Unbreaking if you find that these enchants aren't enough, or if you only have Life Mending, then maybe Unbreaking will help. But yeah, Unbreaking is one of the last enchants you're going to get. And then, of course, there's the big damage enchant options. They are options because they're all incompatible with each other. I have an AoE setup right here, which is good against mobs. You won't be able to use it against bosses at all. There's the all-arounder setup here, which has a bit kind of lower damage than these and these, but it works. It's AoE and single target, and it works on bosses. And then we have our big damage enchants, which are probably going to be using for your in-game setups, maybe even early game if you want to rush one of them, but we'll go over that. So there's Echo, which you have a chance to deal AoE sound damage in an area of 3 blocks. So that's basically just regular AoE damage in an area of 3 blocks. The weird thing is that it doesn't hit the target that you're currently hitting, but it'll hit everything else. So that's how I've seen it work, and it doesn't work on bosses. You can use it with Sharpness, though, and Sharpness increases your attack damage, which helps with the spell infusion stacks. So yeah, there's Thundering, which you have a chance to summon a lightning bolt and damage entities in a range relative to level. At Thundering 4, it's going to be a 20 block radius, so that's way wider than this one. Both of these enchants, they end up dealing 100% of the damage of the triggering attack. So like if you crit, then Thundering crits. If you crit, then Echo crits. So yeah, that's basically how that works. Thundering can be really loud though. You could walk into your own thunder, which could hurt a lot. Because again, it deals your damage essentially. And it can turn like dirt or something like that into lava. But it's a lot of fun. It's really strong. It can be really, really OP against mobs. But yeah, that's Thundering for you. This one has a 55% chance to trigger. This one has a 20% chance to trigger. Both can be used with Sharpness. And yeah, that's pretty much how they work. Then we have Shockwave. It has a 55% chance to trigger. At level 4, I don't know how much damage it deals at level 4. I know it's going to be technically less than these, but it adds to your damage. It attacks the target that you're attacking, and it works on bosses, so that's good. It's a chance to deal explosive damage in an area of 3 blocks. And when it does go off, you hear an explosive noise. You won't see any effects, but the extra damage will be there. And it can deal extra damage, to mobs in a radius of 3 blocks. So that's pretty nice to have. And it's good that it works on bosses, and it works with Sharpness, so that's good. But keep in mind, sharpness is a relatively low amount of damage, especially in this mod pack. It's probably the lowest damage enchant in this mod pack. Next, we have the big hitters right here. Void Strike and Enigma Resonator. I find that Enigma Resonator is more consistent than Void Strike, but there are times where Void Strike has beaten Enigma Resonator. I find that Enigma Resonator beats Void Strike 4 about 7 out of 10 times when you have a certain amount of XP, which is 500 levels. Void Strike 4 has an 8% chance to trigger, and it deals 8 times damage when it does trigger. So that can be a lot. It can be a lot of damage. And then Enigma Resonator deals damage relative to the amount of XP you have. It's a logarithmic formula, so at a certain point you'll notice that you're climbing like less and less and less, but you can still climb like pretty ridiculously high. 500 levels, like I said, is what beats Void Strike 4. 500 levels is about 176% extra damage. And then at 1,000 levels, you get about 200% extra damage. So you can kind of see where the climb starts taking place. And yeah, Enigma Resonator really good for DPS. I think it's going to be very good for Battlemage. But for a pure spellcaster, things can go very interesting. And this is kind of where these stats right here come into play. You can actually say, you can actually not do luckiness, and you cannot do strength. And you can put all of your points into one of these, whichever element you choose. And then you can put Void Strike on your weapon, probably the Claymore, in the or you can put it on the Frost Gavel, depending upon which one, the strongest of whatever you can find, because dungeon difficulty does level stuff up, and I'm not really sure how high the Frost Gavel can go. I know the Frost Gavel might be kind of the dominant weapon until you beat Sideralis and you find like a Claymore. But yeah, and then of course you'd probably be using the Claymore for both of these right here. But you can actually use Void Strike as your only multiplier and basically have 100 points, assuming you're leveling to level 100, in one of these. And that would actually be a pretty decent build. There are spells that do like a crazy amount of damage, so going all into Void Strike is a possibility, and that's one of the ways that these stats actually come into play. And the other one is finding something that, let's see, where is it? Yeah, here. So finding something like this that gives spell power and spell critical damage and a high amount of it, like a relic like that, that's also the other instance in which these would actually finally come into play. You'd probably still be doing luckiness for that, but yeah, that's kind of the way to make Void Strike work really well. And the idea behind that would be that you're not spamming spells, you're not dealing like DPS, but every spell, or if a spell procs Void Strike, it's going to hit ridiculously hard. And you basically end up only casting a few spells, and you end up winning the fight. So that's one strategy. And then there's the Battlemage strategy, of course, of doing the regular way of 50 luckiness, 50 strength, and Enigma Resonator for DPS. So then if you're going to fight Archmagus, just like Magic Protection, you can actually use Smite. Smite shreds its shield, which gives it resistance. So yeah, Smite's really good against Archmagus. So next we move on to the spellbooks. And the only spellbook that I would really recommend for Battlemage is, of course, Battlemage. That's because of the spells involved, and I'm going to go over them real quick. The main reason is Overdrive. You perform a Nova, and you deal, damage to enemies around you, but you also start giving yourself an attacking stacking attack speed buff, and it can be triggered on hit. So when it's triggered on hit, it actually doesn't require a Frost Rune when you trigger it on hit, and you get a stacking attack speed buff. It stacks up to Overdrive 3. You can attack pretty fast at Overdrive 3, so fast that I don't really feel like you need Dex, especially with other stuff that can help you like this. So yeah, I find having Overdrive is really, really good. Then there's Frost Flurry, and this is for casting spells specifically. So Frost Flurry, if you want to cast this, you can. It projects a frozen statue in the direction you're facing, and that's going to stop after a certain distance, or when it collides with something. So when it collides with like a boss or a mob, and it deals frost damage repeatedly. And basically, it's almost like a frost statue that's doing like this sort of like ballet pose or a martial art pose, and it does like a bunch of sword swipes in a row. I think it's really cool. It's a really cool like single target ability that Frost actually has. So I dig it. I like that one a lot. Then we have Ice Storm. You can create icicles that just kind of orbit around you in a spiral, and the spiral actually goes inward, and you deal frost damage every half a second. They disappear after 2 seconds. It's just a really good AoE spell to kind of run around and do. I kind of like that. If you do want to cast more spells, you can look at my introduction to magic video, which was the caster build. So if you're going to be a pure caster, but you're going to use those weapons, then you can look at the other spells that each school has. I'm just going to go over the Battlemage books for the Spellblades, since Battlemage is the main build. But Spellsword is pretty awesome too. So the fire, for fire, we have Flame Overdrive, which is the same thing as Frost, but it's just the fire version. We have Scorching Wind, which you launch a sphere of air in a direction. This air is like a really hot air. It deals fire damage to enemies that are like caught up in it. It deals that fire damage per second, and it carries them in the direction of that wind. So it's actually a really, really nice ability to have. But basically, like, mobs just won't touch you at all with that ability. Then we have Flickering Flame, which is really, really nice. You teleport to the nearest enemy and you strike them repeatedly for 1 times your melee DPS if they are the only enemy nearby. But if there are more enemies, you teleport to all of them equally. So you're just like jumping from enemy to enemy to enemy to enemy, and it looks very, very like anime. And it has a 0.2 times modifier debuff for spell on hit effects like Overdrive, so that it's, not too powerful with that. But I think it's still a really, really good ability. It's really nice. I find myself using that one pretty often when I go into fire. And then, I think I might still be wearing it. Yep, LOL. I am still wearing that one. Okay, so Arcane Battlemage Spellbook. We have the Arcane Overdrive, which again is the same thing as all the other overdrives. We have the Arcane Twin Slash, which you slash around you at your location as well as a targeted location, and you deal arcane damage per slash. And it looks really cool. It's like 2 floating swords in the air. You slash around you, and then they go to that targeted location, which will be an enemy, and it slashes them. So that's pretty nice. And then Ender's Gaze, you shoot like a slow moving ender pearl. The enemy that's hit will gain 5 rotating Ender Eyes, and it lasts 4 seconds. They deal arcane damage every 2/5 of a second, so they're dealing it really fast. And if that enemy dies, the eyes are actually going to detach. They're going to refresh their duration if they find a new host to attach to. So you can have a whole bunch of mobs and you can kind of clear them one by one with just one spell. So that's kind of like that pseudo AoE that I was talking about. And this is an example of a really good relic that you can find for Arcane. And of course, you can apply the same logic to Frost and Fire. That one gives me percent strength, a little bit on the lower side, but it also gives me arcane spell power, which is very good. So that's a relic that actually can be acceptable to find. So keep that in mind as we go into our relics here. The relics, of course, you're going to want to mainly aim for percent strength, and I would go for 30 or above. That one's kind of nice. I guess it gives me a little bit of lifesteal. That one's giving me spell critical damage and arcane spell power and strength, and 41 strength at that. So that one's a crazy good relic to actually find. Yeah, if you found 5 of these, my God, that would be so good. Then there's a 38% strength one, and of course, if you're going Battle Mage, you're actually going to want a melee crit chance relic. If you're going Spell Sword, again, you don't have to have those relics. You're probably going to have, if you're going Spell Sword and just casting spells with specifically with the swords, you're going to be doing percent intelligence. So again, you're going to build it exactly like the caster build, but you're just going to be using these enchants for your weapon. And you're going to be using those intelligence relics, or you're going to be doing like I said with the Void Strike build. So moving on, affixing relics. You can affix relics to your armor. It can only be done on crafted armor. It cannot be done on looted armor. You need the smithing table to do it. You can only do it once. It cannot be undone, and it cannot be overwritten by another relic. So you need to be very, very careful about doing it. If you do find a really strong head and chest relic early on, you can put enchants on them to protect them, such as mending and whatnot. So I highly recommend you actually do that, because you can get a whole bunch of mending and all these other enchants, and you can be fine losing those enchants because it's easy to like trade for them again when you set up a villager trading hall, but you do not want to lose the relic. So that's kind of the big thing, is that you don't want to waste the relic by affixing it to the wrong thing, and you don't want to waste the relic by getting rid of enchants that you're putting on the relic. So I guess there is a way of keeping the relic and getting enchants off of it, but it's rather expensive. So, and that's probably only going to be an end game thing for most people. So I'm not really going to dive too much into that. It's called the Tome of Extraction. You can look it up in the Chronicle of Shadows. It's a Zenith thing. But yeah, that's affixing relics. And you cannot affix relics to legs or boots, because there are no leg or boot relics. So, moving on to backpacks. We have the Blaze Traveler's Backpack, which is really good. Immunity to fall damage and fireballs sent by blazes. That's one that I use especially when traveling. I like being immune to fall damage when traveling. Magma Cube Traveler's Backpack, immunity to fire damage. Really good to wear in the nether, especially if you fall into lava, which some people do. um, which it can be kind of easy to do sometimes. Sometimes there can be like just this one small hole that you cannot see, and you just fall right into lava. And but if you have your Magma Cube Traveler's Backpack, you're gonna be fine. Traveler's Backpack, it actually provides night vision. You can find it in mine shafts. It's like almost guaranteed to be in mushroom mines, so that's usually where I find it. And mushroom mines is actually an overworld structure. It's a big towering mushroom that has multiple floors and enchanted zombies. So it's a rare-ish structure, but I usually explore for it and find it at least once. Squid Traveler's Backpack, it grants water breathing and night vision when you're underwater. So you can swim forever and you can see in the water. So that's pretty good to have as well when traveling. Along with the Lapis Traveler's Backpack, those are basically the 5 best backpacks in my opinion. Um, so we have artifacts that can help us. We have the Deathcap Mushroom and we have the Fist of Fury. I'm actually going to put the Fist of Fury above the Deathcap Mushroom. Fist of Fury, when you it's from Arcane. You can read the grimoire that you get from tutorial quests. To read all about Arcane and how to get this is actually pretty easy to create. When you right click, you're going to use 30 mana and you're going to get a buff called the Rage buff, and it increases attack speed by a lot. So that can be a lot of DPS and it can help you out. And you can just right click and then switch to your weapon or dual wielding weapons and then attack. Deathcap Mushroom, when you don't have mana anymore, you can just right click this and you can gain haste 4. You can find this randomly in dungeons and structures. It can be kind of rare, but when you do find it, it's really nice. And it uses durability though, but there's a way to remedy that. This also uses durability. It's the Charm of Absorption 4, but it continuously refreshes 8 hearts. So you have like 8 extra hearts, which is nice. And you can only have one charm active and at a time, and it's going to be in the charm slot. That's the only way you get the effect. So, you hold it, you right click it to turn it on, then you put it in your charm slot, and then you have to kind of take it out periodically to heal it with mending and life mending. Same with this. You would have to have it in your hand to kind of heal it with mending and life mending because they use durability. This one only uses durability if you actually attack with it. So you could end up, not having to put these enchants on there because using it to cast its ability doesn't actually use durability at all. So Unbreaking, Life Mending, and Mending can go on these because they have durability. But there's also something called the Hardening Catalyst, which you can apply in an anvil to make any item unbreakable. But it's very expensive, costs a couple shulker shells and a couple netherite ingots and a nether star, something like that. So yeah, it's pretty expensive to make, but it's very end game. But it's also very useful for pretty much any item that has durability. So now we kind of get to the reason why Berserker's Fury can be phased out, and that's because instead of getting Strength 3, you can get Strength 4. It grants permanent strength, and we thought that the price of it being, a netherite ingot and a gleaming compound being rather expensive, strength was just a little bit too low, so it's been bumped up all the way to strength 4. So if you get this thing, you have pretty much permanent strength 4, and that, can be better than Berserker's Fury, because even though you don't get resistance 3 and speed 3, there's a resistance 2 charm, which costs shulker shells, but you can get that at the end of the game. When you have Prot 20, it's pretty hard to hurt you regardless. There's many different ways of getting speed, such as reforging, and you can read the last tutorial quest on how to reforge. There's something called the socks from the Things mod that can give you speed. Dexterity can give you speed. You don't really need to build dex in this particular build, the Battlemage build, but yeah, dexterity can give you movement speed. So there's a lot of stuff that can give you movement speed, so you don't really need speed 3 from Berserker's Fury. And later on, you don't need resistance 3, and then strength 4 can finally just phase strength 3 out. So Berserker's Fury 3 would be unneeded by the time you get this. So that's a pretty cool thing that we have, you know, different types of progression like that. The Broken Watch, it increases status effect duration by 50%. Really, really important for overdrive spells. I actually really like that for overdrive spells, and basically any other status effects you get. You can have your infusions for longer, so that's nice. There's these wings you can get, which they're equipable in the cape trinket slot. So, and there's all different types of wings you can get. You get them from the elytra, you craft them from the elytra. So let's see, Icarus. Bunch of different wings. So pick whatever you want and grab it. And then there's the monocle, which gives you permanent night vision, so you don't really have to wear this just for night vision anymore. Then there's the empty agglomeration, which combine 2 trinkets that share at least 1 slot to, it says agglomerate them, but basically combine them. You can combine 2 stuff that shares the glove slot. That can be useful. You cannot combine 2 different Relic X items. You won't be able to combine 2 Relic X necklaces to get like a crazy necklace. That's just, you know, too OP and you can't do it. But you can combine this with another like necklace from like Things, or any other like necklace that is a trinket that you want to wear. And there's a bunch of different trinkets, and you can go through them all. And then there's all the potion charms. You can go through all those, which they're made with whatever potion that they say they are. So if you want to make a charm of resistance, you would make that with the potions of resistance. So, and another cool thing about agglomeration is that you can combine 2 different wings together like I have done here. So that's pretty cool. I think that's about it. Yeah. There's this one's called the Flaming Spellblade instead of the Fire Spellblade. Don't know why, but yeah. But that pretty much covers Spellblades, and I went over the special relics. So next video, we're going to be going over the legendary builds. These are probably the most powerful builds in the game. They are magic builds. There's one for fire and there's one for arcane. This one's probably still the most powerful build in the game, even though it's been nerfed a lot. But there are a lot of cool builds. The rogue builds right now are kind of like my favorite for their flashy combat mechanics. I really like the monk build as well, has flashy combat mechanics, and I'm pretty biased towards the monk because I used to take martial arts. So, and then there's the holy builds like paladin, the apostle, and the priest, which is a healer for servers essentially. So yeah, we'll be going over all those builds in that order. So the next build though is gonna be the legendary magic builds. All right, see you in the next one.